The philosophy of luxury is built on a simple, silent foundation: invisibility. For a guest at the Ethelgard, the sheets must simply be clean. The hallway must simply be free of dust. The room service tray must simply appear. The effort required to maintain this illusion, the sweat, the aching backs, the chemical burns on rough hands, must never be seen. James Hartford knew this philosophy well. He had written it into the mission statement of Hartford Hospitality Group 10 years ago, but he had never felt the crushing weight of it until tonight. James, known to the world as the 32-year-old tech prodigy who had revolutionized logistical software before pivoting to luxury real estate, was currently scrubbing a scuff mark off the marble floor of the lobby. He wasn't wearing his usual bespoke Italian suit. He was wearing a gray polyester jumpsuit that smelled faintly of industrial lemon cleaner and stale sweat. His name tag didn't say CEO. It said Jim. He was on his knees, his muscles screaming in protest. It was day 4 of his undercover operation. The board of directors had called him paranoid when he suggested there was a leak in the company's finances. They told him the numbers were just fluctuating due to the market. But James didn't believe in coincidences. His younger brother, Liam, hadn't believed in them either. And Liam was dead. "Jim, stop daydreaming and get the cart moving. The VIPs in the penthouse suite just checked out. We have a 40-minute turnaround." The voice snapped James out of his thoughts. It was Mr. Henderson, the floor manager. Henderson was a man who wore his authority like a weapon, using it to bludgeon the staff into submission. He was exactly the kind of middle management tyrant James intended to fire once this week was over. "Yes, sir. Moving now," James said, keeping his head down and his voice rough. He had practiced the accent, a generic working-class murmur that invited no curiosity. James pushed the heavy cleaning cart toward the service elevator. The wheels squeaked rhythmically, a sound that grated on his nerves. Being invisible was harder than he thought. For the last few days, people he had employed for years had looked right through him. He had held doors for executives who didn't even nod. He had been bumped into by guests who wiped their sleeves as if his poverty were contagious. It was a humbling educational experience, stripping away the ego that often clouded the judgment of men in his position. He reached the service elevator and pressed the button. As the doors slid open, he saw he wasn't alone. Emma Chen was already inside, leaning heavily against the metal wall. James had noticed Emma on his first day. She was the supervisor for the 10th and 11th floors. She was young, perhaps in her late 20s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that always seemed to be scanning the room for threats. She worked harder than anyone else, moving with a frantic efficiency that bordered on desperation. But she kept to herself. She ate alone in the canteen. She clocked out the second her shift ended, and she never engaged in the gossip that fueled the housekeeping department. "Going up?" James asked, pushing his cart in. Emma jumped, her eyes snapping toward him. For a split second, James saw raw, unfiltered panic in her gaze. It wasn't just startlement. It was the look of a prey animal cornered by a predator. "Yes," she whispered, looking away quickly. She shifted her stance, turning her left shoulder away from him. James frowned. He had an eye for detail. It was what made him a billionaire. He noticed the way she was holding her left arm. It was tucked tight against her ribcage, rigid and unmoving. Her uniform, usually immaculate, was wrinkled around the sleeve, as if the fabric was being stretched by something underneath. "Rough shift?" James tried to make small talk, adopting the weary camaraderie of a fellow worker. "Henderson is on a warpath today." Emma didn't answer immediately. She was breathing shallowly, beads of sweat gathering on her forehead despite the air-conditioned chill of the elevator. It's fine," she managed to say. Her voice was tight, strained. "Just tired." The elevator dinged at the 11th floor. As the doors opened, Emma moved to exit, but she misjudged the distance to the door frame. Her left shoulder brushed, barely tapped, the metal edge. The sound she made was heartbreaking. It was a sharp, strangled gasp, instantly stifled. Her knees buckled, and she stumbled forward. James reacted on instinct. He abandoned his cart and lunged forward, catching her by her right arm before she could hit the floor. "Whoa, easy there," James said, steadying her. "Are you okay?" When he looked at her face, the color had drained completely from her skin. She was ghost white. But what shocked James more was the heat radiating from her. She was burning up. "I'm fine," she hissed, pulling away from him with surprising strength. "Don't touch me." "You're not fine," James said, dropping the gym persona for a second and sounding more like the CEO he was. "You almost passed out. And your arm." He looked at her left arm. Now that he was closer, he could see the unnatural swelling beneath the gray fabric of her uniform. The sleeve was tight. The skin of her hand, protruding from the cuff, was swollen and purple. "You're hurt," James said, his voice lowering. "Badly. Let me call the medic." "No," Emma shouted. The sound echoed in the empty corridor. She looked terrified, her eyes darting to the security camera in the corner of the hallway. She lowered her voice to a frantic whisper. "No medics, no reports. Please. If you call anyone, I lose this job. Please." James paused. He knew the company policy. Any injury on the job had to be reported for insurance and liability reasons. But the terror in her eyes went beyond fear of unemployment. It was a primal fear. "Emma," James said slowly, looking at her name tag. "That arm looks broken. You can't clean rooms with a broken arm. You'll cause permanent damage." "I can do it," she insisted, tears welling in her eyes. "It's just a sprain. I fell at home. It's not a work injury. Please, Jim. I know you're new. Don't start by getting people fired. I just need to finish this shift." She backed away from him, cradling the injured limb. "Please." James stared at her. His moral compass was spinning. As the owner of the hotel, he had a duty to ensure her safety. But as an undercover operative, blowing his cover now could ruin the investigation into the financial leaks. And more than that, his gut told him that reporting this would put her in danger of something far worse than a cast. "Okay," James said softly. "I won't report it. But you can't work like that. Let me take the heavy lifting for the suite. You just supervise, okay?" Emma looked at him, searching his face for deception. After a long, tense moment, she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. As she turned to walk down the hall, James watched her. He noticed she wasn't just limping. She was moving with the caution of someone who expected the floor to give way at any moment. James pulled his phone from his pocket, shielding the screen from the camera. He typed a quick message to his vice president, Marcus, who was the only other person who knew about the undercover operation. "Need a full background check on employee Emma Chen. Housekeeping, 11th floor. Priority 1. Something is wrong." He slipped the phone back into his pocket and pushed his card after her. He had come here to find financial corruption. Instead, he had found a woman terrified of a doctor, hiding a broken bone. The billionaire in him was curious. The brother in him, the one who had lost Liam, was suspicious. The next 2 hours were an exercise in agony, both for Emma and for James. James took over the physical labor. He stripped the beds, he hauled the heavy bags of linen, he scrubbed the bathrooms. He worked with a ferocity that surprised even himself. Every time he glanced at Emma, she was using her good hand to do light dusting or arrange the stationery. But even those small movements caused her face to twitch in suppressed pain. He tried to engage her in conversation, hoping to glean some information. "So, have you worked at the Ethelgard long?" James asked as he wiped down a mirror. 3 years, Emma said. She was standing by the window, looking out at the city skyline. It was raining, the droplets streaking the glass like tears. "Since the opening. That's a long time in this industry," James noted. "Must like the place." Emma let out a short, bitter laugh that she quickly choked back. "It pays the bills, and they provide housing." James paused. The hotel did have a staff dormitory in the basement levels, mostly for international workers on visas or staff who worked split shifts. It was a benefit he had approved, intending to help employees save money on the city's exorbitant rent. "You live downstairs?" James asked. "It's convenient," she said flatly. "Safer." "Safer?" James pressed. "Is the city that dangerous?" Emma turned to look at him. Her eyes were dark, unreadable pools. "Danger is everywhere, Jim. At least here, there are cameras, guards. You sound like you're hiding from someone," James said, trying to keep his tone light. Emma froze. The duster in her hand stopped moving. "We're all hiding from something, even you." You don't scrub floors like someone who's been doing it his whole life. You still have soft hands. James looked at his hands. She was observant. Too observant. I used to work in an office. James lied smoothly. Got laid off. Tech sector crash. Tech, Emma repeated. A shadow passed over her face, a flicker of profound grief. Someone I knew was in tech. Oh yeah? Who? It doesn't matter, she said, shutting down the conversation instantly. Check the minibar. Henderson finds us if a bottle of water is missing. The shift finally ended at 6 p.m. James watched as Emma practically ran toward the service elevators, desperate to get away. He decided to follow her. Not immediately, but at a distance. He waited 5 minutes, then took the stairs down to the basement levels where the staff lockers and dormitories were located. The atmosphere down here was different. The marble turned to concrete. The soft ambient music was replaced by the hum of the HVAC systems. The women's locker room was adjacent to the break room. James loitered near the vending machine, pretending to fumble for change. He could hear voices inside the locker room. "Emma, my God, look at it!" a female voice gasped. That was Maria, another maid. "Shh! Maria, keep your voice down." Emma's voice was a desperate plea. "It's black and blue, Emma. It's swollen to twice the size. You can't just wrap it in a bandage. You need a hospital. This looks like... Did he do this?" There was a silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. "It was an accident," Emma said, her voice trembling. "Just an accident. Please, Maria. If they find out I'm injured, I can't work. If I can't work, I can't pay. If I can't pay..." Okay, Maria soothed. "But take these painkillers. It's all I have." James felt a cold knot form in his stomach. If I can't pay. Pay what? The staff housing was supposed to be subsidized, almost free, and the wages at Hartford Hospitality were 20% above the industry standard. James had insisted on that. Why was she so desperate for money? He heard the locker room door handle turn. James quickly moved around the corner, hiding in the shadow of a large linen cart. Emma walked out. She had changed into casual clothes, a loose hoodie that hid her arm. She didn't head toward the exit that led to the street. She walked deeper into the basement, toward the staff residence wing. James waited for her to turn the corridor, then he pulled out his phone. A secure email had arrived from Marcus. Subject: background check. E. Chen James. We have a problem. The social security number provided for Emma Chen belongs to a woman who died in 1998. The passport on file is a high-quality forgery. Technically, Emma Chen doesn't exist. However, facial recognition software flagged a match from a university database. Her real name is likely Emily Vance, former PhD candidate at MIT, studied advanced cryptography and artificial intelligence. Here is the kicker. She was the lead research assistant for a project funded by Hartford Tech. The project lead was Liam Hartford. She disappeared 3 years ago. The same week Liam died. Call me. Now. James stared at the screen, his breath catching in his throat. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Liam, his brother. Liam had died in a car accident on a rainy highway 3 years ago. The police report said he had lost control of his vehicle. James had never fully accepted it. Liam was an excellent driver. But there was no evidence of foul play. The autopsy showed no alcohol, no drugs, just a tragic accident. But now, here was Emily Vance, the brilliant student Liam had talked about constantly. Liam had called her the brightest mind of her generation. He had said they were working on something that would change the world, something about ethical AI and data privacy. James had never met her. Liam had been secretive about the project in the final months. And then, after the funeral, Emily Vance had simply vanished. James assumed she had moved on, unable to handle the grief or the project without Liam. But she hadn't moved on. She was here, scrubbing toilets in his hotel, using a fake name. With a broken arm she was too terrified to treat. Why? If she was hiding, why hide inside the company of the man's brother? Or maybe she didn't know James was the owner. No, everyone knew the Hartford name. She was hiding in the belly of the beast. James realized his hands were shaking. This wasn't just about labor violations or embezzlement anymore. This was personal. This was about Liam. He needed to talk to her. But he couldn't just walk up and say, "I'm James Hartford." If she was this scared, she would run. And with a broken arm and no resources, running could kill her. He had to maintain the lie. He had to be Jim the janitor. He had to earn her trust. James walked toward the dormitory wing. He needed to see where she lived. He needed to understand the threat. The corridor to the staff quarters was lined with doors. Most were closed. He saw Emma at the far end of the hall. She was standing in front of room B104, but she wasn't opening the door. She was staring at it. James squinted. Taped to the door of room B104 was a piece of paper. Even from this distance, the red ink looked aggressive. Emma ripped the paper down, crumbled it in her good hand, and slipped inside, locking the door audibly. James moved silently down the hall. He stopped at B104. He looked at the floor. A small piece of the paper she had crumbled had torn off and fallen. He bent down and picked it up. It was just a corner of the note. It contained only 2 words and a symbol. The words were, "Last warning." The symbol was a black serpent eating its own tail, an Ouroboros. James felt a chill that had nothing to do with the basement temperature. He knew that symbol. He had seen it once before. It was etched faintly onto the motherboard of the hard drive found in Liam's wrecked car, the hard drive that had been wiped clean. The connection was undeniable. Liam's death wasn't an accident, and Emily Vance, Emma, held the key to the truth. James returned to his own accommodation, a modest hotel room on the 5th floor that he had blocked out for maintenance, allowing him to change and set up his command center. He stripped off the janitor jumpsuit and threw it in the corner. He sat down at his high-powered laptop, the multiple screens glowing in the dark room. He wasn't Jim anymore. He was the CEO of Hartford Industries, a man with the resources of a small nation at his fingertips. He video-called Marcus. "Tell me everything," James commanded the moment Marcus's face appeared. "It's deep, James," Marcus said, his face grim. Emily Vance was erased. Her credit cards, her academic records, her rental history, all scrubbed 3 years ago. It's professional work, government level, or high-end corporate espionage. "She's working as a maid," James said, pacing the room. "She's terrified. She has a broken arm and refuses medical help. And I found a note on her door with the Ouroboros symbol." Marcus went silent. "The same symbol from Liam's drive?" "The same. We thought it was just a manufacturer's mark or some obscure tech logo. But if it's being used to threaten her—" "James, you need to pull her out," Marcus said. "If the people who killed Liam are tracking her, she's not safe. And neither are you." "I can't just grab her," James argued. "She's like a wounded deer. If I spook her, she bolts. And she's smart, Marcus. MIT smart. If she's been hiding for 3 years, she has contingency plans. I need to know what she knows before I blow my cover. So what's the play? Tonight, I infiltrate the deeper network," James said. "The hotel has a secondary server for the staff housing security. I need to see who is putting notes on her door. I need to see who she's meeting. Be careful, James. You're a software genius, but you're not invincible." James ended the call. He sat at the keyboard. This was his domain. He began to type, lines of code cascading down the screens. He bypassed the hotel's standard firewalls. He had built them, after all, so he knew the back doors. He accessed the camera feeds for the basement level. He rewound the footage for the hallway outside room B104. He watched the timestamp, 17:45 p.m. A figure approached Emma's door. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a masked thug. It was Henderson, the floor manager. James leaned in. Henderson looked nervous. He looked left, then right. He taped the note to the door. Then he did something strange. He pulled out a device. It looked like a credit card reader, and held it near the door handle. The lock beeped electronically. Henderson entered the room. James's blood boiled. This was a violation of privacy, of safety. Henderson was inside for 4 minutes. When he came out, he wasn't carrying anything, but he looked satisfied. What was he doing? James switched to the internal financial logs of the hotel. He searched for Henderson's activity. He found a subfolder in the payroll system labeled Deductions. He opened it. It was a list of employees, mostly immigrants or those with limited records. Emma Chen was at the top. Emma Chen, weekly wage, $800. Deduction, housing, $300. Deduction, uniform maintenance, $50. Deduction, admin fee, $100. Deduction, debt repayment, $300. Net pay, $50. James stared at the numbers in horror. $50. She was working 60-hour weeks for $50. The debt repayment line was the smoking gun. It was illegal. It was debt bondage. But to whom was the debt owed? James traced the routing number for the debt repayment. It didn't go to the hotel's accounts. It was siphoned off to a shell company called Ouroboros Holdings. There it was again. James kept digging. He looked at the metadata for Ouroboros Holdings. It was buried under layers of offshore accounts, but James was relentless. He traced the IP addresses used to access the account. One of the IP addresses originated from inside the hotel, specifically from the penthouse suite. The penthouse was currently occupied by a long-term guest, a man named Victor Callis, a consultant for international logistics. James felt a click in his brain. Victor Callis. He had met him briefly at a charity gala years ago, a shark in a suit, ruthless. The picture was starting to form, but it was ugly. A trafficking ring operating inside his own hotel, using debt to enslave vulnerable people. And somehow this ring was connected to his brother's death. Suddenly, a red alert flashed on his screen. Security breach detected. Basement level 2. James switched back to the camera feed. He saw the hallway outside Emma's room. 2 large men in dark suits were walking down the corridor. They weren't hotel security. They moved with military precision. They stopped at Emma's door. One of them didn't knock. He kicked the door right next to the lock. It didn't give way immediately. James saw the door to B104 open slightly from the inside. Emma's face appeared, pale and terrified. One of the men grabbed the door and shoved it open, disappearing inside. James didn't think. He didn't plan. He grabbed his radio, clipped it to his janitor belt, and sprinted out of the room. He took the stairs, jumping 3 at a time. He had to get down there. He had promised not to report her injury, but he hadn't promised to let her be killed. The elevator was too slow. He hit the stairwell, his feet pounding against the concrete. "Don't be dead," he prayed. "Emily, don't be dead." He burst out into the basement corridor just in time to hear a scream, short, sharp, and cut off abruptly. James ran toward room B104. The door was ajar. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have backup. All he had was the element of surprise and a rage that had been building for 3 years. James Hartford, the billionaire, disappeared. Jim, the desperate man with nothing to lose, charged into the room. The door to room B104 didn't just open, it exploded inward under the force of James's shoulder. For a split second, the scene inside froze like a tableau painting of nightmares. The room was small, a standard staff dormitory box with a single bed and a narrow wardrobe. The air smelled of lavender laundry detergent and fear. Emma was cornered against the far wall, clutching her injured arm to her chest. A man in a dark suit, built like a linebacker with a neck that disappeared into his shoulders, had one hand wrapped around her throat. The second man, the one who had kicked the door, was rifling through her drawers, tossing meager possessions onto the floor. They turned at the noise. "Housekeeping," James yelled. It was an absurd thing to shout, but he needed a second of confusion. He needed them to underestimate him. He needed them to see Jim the janitor, not a threat. The man by the dresser sneered. "Get lost, janitor. Wrong room." "I saw the leak," James stammered, stepping fully into the room, feigning the clumsiness of a terrified employee. He held a heavy metal canister of industrial air freshener in his hand, hidden behind his leg. "Mr. Henderson sent me. The pipes." "I said get lost," the man barked, stepping forward to shove James out. That was the mistake. He stepped into James's personal space. James didn't use karate or some mystical martial art. He used physics and desperation. As the man reached out to push him, James swung the metal canister upward in a vicious arc. The heavy steel connected with the man's radial nerve, right at the elbow. There was a sickening crunch. The man howled, his arm going dead instantly. James didn't stop. He capitalized on the shock. He drove his shoulder into the man's solar plexus, sending him stumbling back into the wardrobe, which crashed down with a deafening noise. The second man, the one holding Emma, released her, his eyes widening. He reached into his jacket, presumably for a weapon. "Emma, run!" James screamed. He didn't wait for the man to draw. James grabbed the nearest object, a heavy ceramic lamp from the nightstand, and hurled it. It wasn't an accurate throw, but it smashed against the wall inches from the man's head, showering him with shards. The man flinched, shielding his eyes. "Go, now!" James grabbed Emma's good arm. She was frozen, her eyes wide with shock, but at his touch, she jolted into motion. They scrambled out of the room, into the hallway. "The stairs!" James commanded, pulling her along. He could hear the heavy footsteps of the thugs recovering behind them. "Don't look back." They hit the stairwell door just as a silenced gunshot thwipped into the plaster next to James's ear. The sound was small, almost insignificant, like a staple gun, but the implication was massive. They weren't here to intimidate. They were authorized to kill. James shoved Emma through the door and slammed it shut, engaging the deadbolt. It wouldn't hold them forever, but it would buy seconds. "Can you run?" James asked, looking at her. She was pale, clutching her arm, beads of sweat running down her face. "Yes," she gritted out. "Where are we going?" "Not the lobby. Too many cameras. We need the loading dock." They descended the stairs, their footsteps echoing on the concrete. James's mind was racing. He was the CEO. He knew the layout of this building better than anyone. He knew that on the sub-basement level, there was a secondary exit used for waste management that led directly to the alleyway. But he also knew something else. If these men were professionals, they would have the exits covered. "Change of plan," James said, stopping on the landing of the B3 level. "We can't go out yet." "What? Why?" Emma gasped, leaning against the railing. "They'll be waiting. We need to disappear inside the building first." James led her into the B3 corridor. This was the mechanical heart of the hotel. The boiler rooms, the server farms, the laundry chutes. It was loud, hot, and labyrinthine. He pulled her into the laundry processing room. Massive industrial machines were churning, washing thousands of sheets. The noise was deafening, a constant roar of water and tumbling fabric. "In here!" James shouted over the noise, pointing to a laundry cart filled with dirty towels. "You want me to hide in the laundry?" Emma looked at him incredulously. "It's the only way to the garage without triggering the sensors," James said. "The laundry carts go up to the mezzanine via a dedicated lift. It bypasses the security checkpoints." He helped her climb into the canvas cart, covering her with a layer of towels. "Stay down. Don't make a sound," he whispered. James grabbed the handle of the cart. He hunched his shoulders, resuming the posture of Jim. He pushed the cart toward the freight elevator. The doors opened. Inside was a security guard, one of the regular hotel staff, a man James knew by name, Stan. "Hey, Jim," Stan said, looking bored. "Working late?" "Yeah. Henderson's got me running linens to the spa," James muttered, keeping his head down. "Spilled wine in the sauna." Stan chuckled. "Rich people, right? Go ahead." James pushed the cart in. The elevator ride was the longest 30 seconds of his life. He could feel Emma's tension radiating through the canvas. If she made a sound, if she groaned in pain, it was over. The doors opened on the mezzanine level, which connected to the VIP parking garage. James pushed the cart out, waited for the doors to close, and then frantically dug Emma out. "We made it," he whispered. "My car is on level 2. You have a car?" Emma asked, stumbling out. "On a janitor's salary?" James didn't answer. He led her to a shadowed corner where a sleek black sedan was parked under a canvas cover. It wasn't a luxury car. It was a nondescript mid-range rental he used for operations like this. But it was fast, and it was armored. He unlocked it. "Get in." As they peeled out of the garage, tires screeching, James saw the rearview mirror. 2 black SUVs were pulling up to the garage exit. "Hold on," James said, his voice turning cold. He slammed the accelerator. The car shot forward, not toward the exit, but toward the staff-only ramp that was currently blocked by a wooden barrier arm. "James!" Emma screamed. He smashed through the wooden barrier, debris flying over the windshield. The car fishtailed onto the side street, merging violently into the evening traffic. He wove through the cars, running 2 red lights, checking the mirrors constantly. After 20 minutes of aggressive driving, he was sure. They weren't being followed. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a throbbing ache in his shoulder where he had rammed the door. He looked over at Emma. She was slumped in the passenger seat, cradling her arm. She was looking at him, really looking at him, for the first time. "Who are you?" she whispered. "You're not a janitor. You fight like a soldier and drive like a stuntman. Who are you?" James kept his eyes on the road. "I'm the man who is going to find out why my brother really died." Emma inhaled sharply. The silence that filled the car was heavier than the humid night air. They didn't go to a hospital. James drove 40 miles out of the city, up into the winding hills of the coastal cliffs. He pulled up to a modern, minimalist structure perched on the edge of a precipice. It was a glass box house, isolated and secure. It was one of James's private retreats, purchased through a shell company. No one at Hartford Hospitality knew it existed, not even Marcus. "Where are we?" Emma asked, her voice groggy. The pain was clearly taking its toll. "Safety," James said. He helped her out of the car. The sea breeze was cold, whipping her hair across her face. He guided her into the house, disabling the high-end security system with a biometric scan of his palm. Inside, the house was stark but warm. He led her to the kitchen island and sat her down on a stool. "I need to look at that arm," James said, retrieving a comprehensive medical kit from a cabinet. "I have basic EMT training. If it requires surgery, I have a private doctor on call who is discreet, but I need to see it first." Emma hesitated. She pulled her arm back. "You don't understand. It's not just a break." "I know about the tracker," James said softly. Emma froze. "How?" "I saw the note. The Ouroboros. And I know you, Emily Vance." She flinched at her real name. It was as if he had slapped her. You're one of them?" "No," James said, stepping into the light so she could see his face clearly for the first time without the grime and the posture of a servant. "Look at me, Emily. Really look at me." She stared at him. She studied the jawline, the specific shade of blue in his eyes. Slowly, recognition dawned. It was a look of disbelief. "Liam?" she whispered. "No," James said, a pang of grief hitting him. "James. His brother." She covered her mouth with her good hand. "James. Oh my God. You're the CEO. You're the billionaire. Currently, I'm just the guy trying to fix your arm," James said gently. "Please, let me help." Slowly, trembling, she extended her left arm. James took a pair of medical shears and carefully cut the fabric of her uniform sleeve. He peeled back the cloth. What he saw made his stomach turn. The forearm was indeed broken. The ulna was fractured, judging by the deformation. But the skin around it was a mess of old scars and new inflammation. And there, right in the center of the swelling, was a rectangular lump under the skin, pulsating with a faint rhythmic heat. It wasn't just a tracker. It was integrated into her nervous system. "It looks infected," James murmured, his anger cold and sharp. "Who did this to you?" "I did," she whispered. James looked up, shocked. "What?" "I broke it," she said, tears finally spilling over. 3 days ago. I slammed it in a heavy door on purpose." James was stunned. "Why? Why would you do that?" "Because the pain masks the signal," she explained, her voice shaking. "When the body is in acute trauma, it releases cortisol and adrenaline. It changes the bioelectrical output of the skin. It interferes with the transmission. It was the only way to go dark for a few hours so I could meet—" She stopped. "Meet who?" James pressed. "A journalist," she said. "I was trying to hand over the data, but he never showed up. Henderson did." James began to clean the wound with antiseptic. She hissed in pain but didn't pull away. "This is barbaric," James said. "We need to get this thing out of you." "You can't," she said quickly. "If you remove it without the code, it releases a neurotoxin. It's a failsafe. It will kill me in seconds." James dropped the gauze. He stared at the device. It was a kill switch, a leash. "Liam?" James's voice broke. "Did Liam do this?" "No!" Emma shouted, defending the dead man with sudden ferocity. "Liam tried to stop it. That's why they killed him. He built the prototype for medical monitoring to save heart attack victims. They weaponized it. They turned it into the ultimate control device. Human trafficking without chains. Corporate espionage without leaks. If an employee tries to leave, they just turn them off. James felt a nausea rising in his throat. He had thought he was investigating embezzlement. He had uncovered a technological nightmare. "Who are they, Emily?" James asked. "Ouroboros," she said. "But that's just a project name. The people running it. James, it's not just criminals. It's your board. It's your investors. It's half the people you shake hands with at galas." She looked at him, her eyes pleading. "I stayed at the hotel because it was the last place they'd look for the missing scientist, hiding in plain sight, cleaning their toilets. But I stayed for another reason." "Why?" "Because of you," she said. James frowned. "Me? Liam told me that if anything ever happened to him, you were the only one who could stop it. But he also said you were impulsive, that you'd get yourself killed if you went in blind. I had to wait. I had to watch you. I had to make sure you weren't one of them." "And the tracking device?" James pointed to her arm. "The prompt. The information I found said you were protecting me." "I am," she said. She reached into her pocket with her good hand and pulled out a small, ruggedized flash drive. "This isn't the data. I am the data. The chip in my arm. It doesn't just track location. It contains the decryption key for the entire Ouroboros network. Liam hid it inside me. I am the walking evidence." She took a breath. "The device transmits a proximity warning. If I get within 10 feet of you, specifically you, James Hartford, for more than 5 minutes, it triggers a silent alarm to HQ. They programmed it that way. They knew you were the threat. They used me as a repulsive magnet. If I came near you to tell you the truth, they would know instantly." James stared at her. "So by staying away, by hiding in the basement, you were keeping the target off my back." "Yes," she whispered. "But when you went undercover, when you came into the elevator, you were too close. The timer started. That's why I ran. That's why I broke my arm. To try and scramble the signal so they wouldn't see that James Hartford and Emily Vance were in the same room." James realized the magnitude of her sacrifice. She had endured 3 years of poverty, physical pain, and terror just to keep him safe until the right moment. She had broken her own bone to buy them this conversation. "They know now," James said grimly. "The fight in the dorm. The car chase. The alarm has been triggered." "Yes," Emily said. "They're coming, James. And they won't stop until one of us is dead." James stood up. He walked to the window, looking out at the dark ocean. He wasn't the billionaire anymore. He wasn't the janitor. He was a man at war. "Let them come," James said. He turned back to her. "But we're going to be ready. You said this chip has a decryption key?" "Yes." "And it has a kill switch?" "Yes." "Then we need to do something they don't expect," James said, his eyes hard. "We're not going to hide. We're going to use their own weapon against them." James spent the next hour securing the house. He engaged the steel shutters, activated the perimeter drones, and set up a sterile field in the living room. He sat across from Emily, his laptop open. "We need to hack the chip," James said. "We can't remove it, but we can rewrite the command line." "Impossible," Emily said, though she looked slightly better after taking strong painkillers and having her arm properly splinted. "It uses a polymorphic code. It changes every 10 seconds. Liam wrote it," James said. "And Liam and I used to build forts together. We used to write secret codes in binary when we were 12. He typed rapidly. He wouldn't build a lock without a key for his brother. What's the serial number on the device? It should be readable on a near-field scanner." James used his phone's NFC reader, holding it near her swollen arm. The phone beeped. A string of hex code appeared. ID Oro 99 LH Gen LH, James read. "Liam Hartford, Genesis?" "Maybe," Emily said. James entered the code into his decryption software. He tried standard brute force attacks. Nothing. The firewall was impenetrable. "Think, James," he muttered to himself. Liam was sentimental. He loved puzzles. He looked at Emily. "The note on your door. The Ouroboros, a snake eating its tail. It represents infinity, cycles, return. It represents a closed loop, Emily corrected, a system that feeds on itself. Or, James said, a memory surfacing. It represents the end becoming the beginning. He looked at the serial number again. Oro 99. 1999, James said. The year our parents died. The year Liam and I were left alone. He typed in the date of their parents' death as the seed key. Access denied. Damn. James slammed the table. Try the car, Emily said suddenly. What? The car accident. Liam's accident. The last thing he did before he died. He called me. He left a voicemail. He didn't say anything. He just hummed. Hummed? Yeah, a weird three-note tune. I thought he was delirious. James froze. A three-note tune? Was it C, F sharp, C? Emily looked at him, surprised. Yes, a tritone, the devil's interval. How did you know? James smiled, a sad, nostalgic smile. It wasn't a tune. It was the startup sound of the very first computer we built together in our garage. He was telling us the source code is the origin. James opened the command prompt. He didn't type a password. He uploaded a sound file, a digital recreation of that specific interval. He pressed enter. The screen flashed green. Root access granted. Neurotoxin protocol disabled. GPS. Uplink looped. Emily gasped, clutching her arm. The pulsing, it stopped. The heat is gone. James slumped back in his chair, exhaling a breath he felt he had been holding for 3 years. We own the chip now. They can't kill you, and they can't track you. But they know we're here, Emily said, looking at the security monitors. The previous signal gave away our location before you looped it. James looked at the screen. On the thermal cameras aimed at the driveway, 3 heat signatures were approaching through the woods. They were moving tactically. You're right, James said. He stood up, his face hardening. They're here to clean up the mess. He walked over to a wall panel and punched in a code. The panel slid open, revealing a safe. Inside was a handgun, a sleek 9mm. James took it out. He checked the magazine. I hate guns, James said. Liam hated them too. What are you going to do? Emily asked, fear returning to her eyes. I'm going to negotiate, James said, but from a position of strength. He turned to her. I need you to stay here. Lock the door behind me. If I don't come back in 10 minutes, you take the car and you drive to the FBI headquarters. Do not stop for anyone. The drive has the evidence. You are the witness. James, no. She stood up. You can't go out there alone. There are 3 of them. I'm not alone, James said, glancing at his laptop. I just sent a push notification to every device on the Hartford network, every phone, every tablet, every smart TV in the hotel. I just went live. Live? I'm streaming the security feed, James said. The world is about to watch them try to kill James Hartford. Let's see if they're brave enough to commit murder in front of 1 million witnesses. He opened the front door and stepped out into the cold night air. The gun at his side. The camera drone buzzing silently above him. The shadows in the trees stopped moving. Gentlemen, James shouted, his voice echoing off the glass walls of his fortress. Smile! You're trending! James stood on the gravel driveway, his breath misting in the cold night air. Above him, the drone hovered like a mechanical hummingbird, its green LED blinking, a signal that it was broadcasting live to the world. 20 yards away, 3 figures emerged from the tree line. They were dressed in tactical gear, faces obscured by balaclavas. They raised their weapons, silenced submachine guns, but they didn't fire. James held up his phone, screen facing them. 1.2 million, James said, his voice calm but amplified by the adrenaline coursing through his veins. That's how many people are currently watching this stream. I posted the link to the company's official Twitter account. James Hartford held hostage. It's trending. The lead mercenary hesitated. In the shadows, James saw the man tap his earpiece. If you shoot me, James continued, walking slowly toward them, you commit murder in 4K resolution before a global audience. The cloud upload is instantaneous. There is no erasing the footage. There is no cleaning this up. The leader lowered his weapon slightly. He knew the rules of engagement. Assassination required silence. This was a spectacle. "Mr. Hartford," the leader said, his voice distorted by a modulator, "this is a mistake. We are private security sent to retrieve a stolen asset. The woman is unwell." "The woman," James said, his voice turning icy, "is a whistleblower under my personal protection. And you are trespassing." Sirens began to wail in the distance. The live stream had done its job. The local police and likely the FBI had been alerted by the sudden public panic. The mercenary cursed under his breath. He looked at his team, then back at James. "This isn't over, Hartford. You can't live stream your life forever. Eventually the battery dies. Eventually you have to sleep." "Tell Sterling I said hello," James bluffed, throwing a name out into the dark. The mercenary stiffened. The reaction was subtle, a slight tasing of the shoulders, but James caught it. It was confirmation. "Fall back," the leader commanded. The three men melted back into the darkness of the forest with terrifying speed. They didn't run. They vanished, professional and disciplined. James didn't move until the wail of the police sirens was deafeningly close. Then he turned and walked back into the house, his legs shaking uncontrollably. He locked the door and slumped against it. "They're gone," James said, exhaling. Emily was at the computer watching the screen. "For now, but you just declared war on your own board of directors." "I needed to buy time," James said, holstering the gun he hadn't used. "And I needed to know who sent them." The leader flinched when I mentioned Sterling. "Robert Sterling?" Emily asked, her eyes widening. "The chairman?" "He was Liam's mentor," James said, the betrayal tasting like ash in his mouth. "He was the one who comforted me at the funeral. He's the one who insisted I take a sabbatical while he handled the day-to-day operations." "It makes sense," Emily said, typing rapidly on the keyboard with one hand. "Sterling sits on the board of 3 major defense contractors. He has the connections to set up a human trafficking ring masked as a hospitality logistics network. And he has the motive. Greed? Power," Emily corrected. "The data on my chip, it's not just financial records. It's blackmail. The Ouroboros network was harvesting data from high-profile guests at your hotels, politicians, judges, celebrities. Sterling has dirt on everyone. That's why he's untouchable." James walked over to the desk. "Not anymore. We have the key." "We have the key," Emily agreed. "But we have a problem. The decryption key on my arm unlocks the files, but the files themselves aren't here. They're on the central mainframe." James froze. "Wait, I thought you said you were the data." "I am the access," Emily clarified. "Think of me as the password, the actual database. The terabytes of video, audio, and financial logs is physically stored on an air-gapped server." "Where?" Emily looked at him. "Where do you think?" "The safest place Sterling knows. The one place no one would look for a server farm." James closed his eyes. "The Ethelgard, the sub-basement. Specifically," Emily said, "behind the wall of the laundry room, where the noise of the machines masks the cooling fans." James laughed, a bitter sound. "So, to finish this, we have to go back to exactly where we started. We have to break into my own hotel." The police arrived, but James handled them with the practiced ease of a man used to legal complications. He claimed it was a misunderstanding, a swatting prank gone wrong, and that the armed men were overzealous paparazzi. He couldn't trust the local police. Sterling's reach was too long. He sent them away, claiming he was leaving for a private airfield. He was leaving, but not for an airfield. "We can't go in as James Hartford and Emily Vance," James said, pacing the living room. "Sterling has likely locked me out of the system biometrically by now, and if they see you, they shoot on sight. So, how do we get into the sub-basement of the most secure hotel in the city?" Emily asked. She had fashioned a sling for her arm out of a silk scarf. James walked to the closet where he had tossed his dirty-smelling jumpsuit. He picked it up. "We don't go in as the owners," James said. "We go in as the ghosts, the invisible people. You want to go back to being a janitor?" "Tonight is the gala of the Golden Sun, isn't it?" James asked. "The charity ball Sterling hosts every year." "Yes," Emily nodded. "It's tonight. The hotel will be swarming with security, VIPs, and press." "Exactly," James smiled grimly. "Chaos. They'll need extra staff. Catering, cleaning, logistics. I know the agency they use for temp workers. We're not going to sneak in through the vents, Emily. We're going to be hired. 3 hours later, inside a cramped van parked 3 blocks from the Ethel Guard. James looked different. He had shaved his head, a drastic move, but necessary to alter his profile. He wore thick glasses and a false beard. Emily had dyed her hair jet black with a box kit picked up at a 24-hour pharmacy and was wearing heavy makeup to cover her pale complexion. They wore the uniforms of City Best Catering. "You ready?" James asked. "No," Emily said honestly. Her broken arm was hidden under a loose blazer, strapped tight against her body. "But let's do it." They walked to the service entrance. Security was tight. Guards were checking IDs and scanning bags. James held his breath. He had forged their digital credentials in the agency database on the ride over, but if the guard looked too closely— "Name?" the guard grunted. "Arthur Dent," James said, using a generic placeholder name. "And this is Trillian. We're on the dishwashing crew." The guard scanned the QR code on James's phone. It beeped green. "Move it. Kitchen is a war zone. Chef is screaming for clean plates." They walked in. The familiar smell of the hotel, lemon polish and expensive perfume, hit James. But this time, the stakes were infinite. They navigated the chaotic corridors of the kitchen. Chefs were shouting, waiters were running with trays of caviar and champagne. No one looked at them. They were part of the scenery. "We need to get to the laundry room," James whispered. "The server entrance is behind the commercial dryers." They slipped away from the dish pit, moving toward the service elevators. Suddenly, the elevator doors opened and Henderson stepped out. James froze. Henderson was the floor manager who had been taking bribes from Sterling. He knew Jim the janitor. Henderson looked right at James. He frowned. He squinted at the glasses, the beard. James's heart hammered against his ribs. "Hey!" Henderson barked. James stopped. Emily gripped his arm with her good hand. "You're with catering?" Henderson asked aggressively. "Yes, sir," James said, pitching his voice lower. "Tuck your shirt in. This is a 5-star hotel, not a barn. Look professional or get out." "Yes, sir. Sorry, sir." Henderson huffed and stormed past them. He hadn't recognized the billionaire CEO he had yelled at for a week. He only saw the uniform. James let out a shaky breath. "Invisibility," he whispered. "It's a superpower." They reached the basement levels. The noise of the gala upstairs was a distant rumble here, replaced by the hum of machinery. They entered the laundry room. It was empty. The night shift was working the event upstairs. "Okay," Emily said, moving to the massive industrial dryer bank. "The entrance is behind Unit 4. It's a hydraulic door disguised as a maintenance panel." She touched the wall. "I need to input the sequence, but I can't do it with one hand fast enough." "Tell me what to do," James said. "You see the panel with the pressure gauges? You have to turn the valves. Left, left, full spin. Then hold the emergency stop button for 5 seconds. James followed the instructions. The hydraulics hissed. The heavy metal machine groaned and swung outward on hidden hinges, revealing a dark corridor bathed in blue LED light. The cool air rushing out smelled of ozone and silicon. "The server farm," James breathed. They stepped inside. Rows of black server racks hummed in the darkness. This was the brain of Ouroboros. "Find the main terminal," Emily said. "I need to plug in." They found the console at the end of the room. Emily pulled a cable from her pocket, connected it to the console, and then, wincing in pain, rolled up her sleeve. She pressed the biometric reader on her tracker against the console's scanner. "Access granted." "Welcome, Administrator." "We're in," Emily said, typing furiously with her good hand. "I'm initiating the data dump. I'm sending everything to the FBI, the New York Times, and your personal secure cloud." A loading bar appeared on the screen. "Uploading, 10%. Suddenly, the lights in the server room turned red. A klaxon began to blare. "Silent alarm," James said. "They know we're here." "I can't stop the upload," Emily cried. "If I disconnect, the data corrupts. It needs 3 minutes." James turned to the door. He checked the magazine of his pistol. He had smuggled it in, taped to the small of his back. "Keep typing," James said, standing in front of the narrow entrance. "I'll buy you 3 minutes." The sound of heavy boots echoed on the concrete outside the laundry room. This wasn't standard hotel security. This was the kill squad. James took cover behind a stack of hard drives. He wasn't a soldier, but he had the advantage of a choke point. The entrance was narrow. They could only come in one at a time. "Hartford," a voice boomed from the darkness. It was Victor Callis, the guest from the penthouse, the enforcer. "I know you're in there. There is no way out." "I don't need a way out, Victor," James shouted back. "I just need 2 minutes." "Uploading 45%. Send in the gas," Victor commanded. James heard a canister roll across the floor. It hissed, spewing white tear gas. James coughed, his eyes stinging instantly. He ripped a piece of fabric from his shirt, urinated on it, an old survival trick, and tied it around his face. "Emily, stay low," he gagged. "I'm at 60%, she yelled, her voice thick with panic. A figure in a gas mask lunged through the smoke. James fired blindly. Bang, bang! The bullets sparked off the metal doorframe, but they kept the attacker back. "Rush him!" Victor yelled. 2 men charged in. James fired again, hitting one in the leg. The man went down screaming. The second man tackled James. The gun skittered across the floor. James and the mercenary rolled amidst the servers. The man was stronger, trained for combat. He punched James in the face, a blow that rattled his teeth and filled his mouth with blood. James fought with the desperation of a man protecting his family. He grabbed a loose server cable, wrapping it around the man's neck, pulling tight. The mercenary thrashed, slamming James against the racks. Sparks flew as equipment was damaged. "James!" Emily screamed. Uploading 85%. The mercenary finally went limp, unconscious from lack of oxygen. James shoved him off, gasping for air, wiping blood from his eyes. But Victor Callis was stepping through the smoke. He was wearing a mask and holding a heavy revolver. He looked like a demon. He leveled the gun at James. "It was a good effort, boy," Victor said. "But business is business." He cocked the hammer. Uploading 99%. "Do it," James screamed. Ding. Upload complete. The room suddenly flooded with bright white light. Not the emergency lights. Floodlights. "Police! Drop the weapon!" Victor spun around. Behind him, filling the laundry room entrance, were a dozen SWAT officers with shields and rifles. Victor froze. "How?" he muttered. James slumped against the server rack, grinning through bloody teeth. "I didn't just upload the files to the news, Victor. I patched this security camera feed directly to the police commissioner's personal phone. He's a friend of my father's. He's been watching for the last 2 minutes. Victor dropped the gun. It clattered on the floor. James looked at Emily. She was crying, slumped over the console, clutching her arm. He crawled over to her. "We did it," he whispered. "We're invisible no more." The sun rose over the city, but for the first time in years, the shadows inside the Ethel Guard were gone. The flashing lights of police cruisers had replaced the glitter of the gala. The paparazzi, who had arrived expecting to photograph celebrities in evening gowns, were instead capturing the perp walk of the decade. James sat on the bumper of an ambulance, a shock blanket draped over his shoulders. A paramedic was stitching a cut above his eyebrow. He watched as Victor Callis was led out in handcuffs, his face a mask of stone. Following him was Robert Sterling, the chairman of the board. Sterling looked older than James had ever seen him. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man who knows his legacy is ashes. Sterling caught James's eye as he was shoved into a federal vehicle. He stopped for a second. "It was for the company, James," Sterling rasped. "To keep the stock high. To protect your inheritance." James stood up, ignoring the paramedic's protest. He walked over to the police car. "My brother wasn't an inheritance, Robert," James said quietly. "He was a person, and so was every single employee you enslaved in that basement." Sterling said nothing as the door slammed shut. James turned back to the ambulance. Emily was being loaded onto a stretcher. Her arm was properly splinted now, and she was on heavy pain medication, but her eyes were clear. "We did it," she whispered as James approached. "You did it," James corrected, taking her good hand. "I just opened the door. You walked through the fire." "What happens now?" she asked. "Now." James looked up at the towering glass facade of his hotel. "Now we burn the old rule book, and we start apologizing. Educational pause. The aftermath of corporate scandals. In real-world corporate scandals, think Enron or Theranos, the arrest is just the beginning. The cleanup phase is where the real work happens. It involves forensic accounting to trace every stolen dollar, legal battles to compensate victims, and a complete restructuring of corporate culture. James faces a massive challenge here. He has to save a company that was rotting from the head down without destroying the livelihoods of the thousands of innocent employees who work there. This is a lesson in crisis leadership. Transparency is the only currency that matters when trust is bankrupt. The next 48 hours were a blur of lawyers, federal agents, and press conferences. The data dump Emily had initiated was catastrophic for Ouroboros. It revealed a network of human trafficking, blackmail, and money laundering that spanned 3 continents. But amidst the chaos, James made one specific request. He wanted a town hall meeting with the staff of the Ethel Guard, not the executives, the ground staff. 2 days after the raid, James walked into the hotel's grand ballroom. He was wearing a suit again, but he didn't look like the polished billionaire of Fortune magazine covers. He still had a bandage on his forehead. He walked with a limp. The room was packed. Housekeepers, janitors, kitchen porters, valet drivers. They stood in uneasy silence. They were terrified. They assumed the hotel would close, that they would lose their jobs. In the front row, James saw Henderson. The manager was sweating profusely, looking around nervously. James stepped up to the microphone. "Good morning," James said. The feedback whined slightly. "Most of you know me as the CEO, but some of you know me as Jim." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. "For the last week I scrubbed your floors. I ate in your canteen. I listened to your worries." James continued. "I saw how hard you work, and I saw how the people I put in charge failed you." He looked directly at Henderson. "Mr. Henderson," James said, his voice amplifying through the room. "Please stand up." Henderson stood, his knees shaking. "Mr. Hartford, I was just following orders from the board." "You fined Emma Chen $50 because she needed a bandage," James said, his voice cold. "You threatened staff with deportation if they complained about unpaid overtime. That wasn't a board order. That was you." You're fired," James said. "Effective immediately. Security will escort you out, and you will be hearing from our legal department regarding your complicity in the trafficking ring." As Henderson was led out, a stunned silence filled the room. Then, someone in the back, a dishwasher, started to clap. Then another. Soon the room was roaring with applause. James held up a hand. "Don't clap yet. Fixing the bad apples isn't enough. We need to fix the tree." He pulled out a piece of paper. "Effective today, the debt deduction system is abolished. All back wages stolen from you under the guise of fees will be repaid with 10% interest. The staff housing in the basement is closed. We are partnering with a local developer to provide subsidized apartments above ground, with windows and dignity. And the minimum wage for all Hartford staff is being raised to $25 an hour." The room erupted. People were crying. It wasn't just about the money, it was about being seen. James looked at the sea of faces. He realized that for 10 years, he had been building hotels for the rich, but ignoring the people who made them run. That ended today. 3 months later, the seasons had changed. The winter chill had thawed into a vibrant spring. Emily sat in a sunny office on the top floor of the Hartford Tech building. It wasn't a corner office for an executive. It was a lab. The sign on the door read, "The Liam Hartford Institute for Ethical AI." She was typing on a keyboard, 2 hands this time. Her arm had healed, though she still had a faint ache when it rained, a permanent reminder of her sacrifice. The door opened and James walked in. He looked healthier, the stress lines around his eyes softened. "How's the code looking?" James asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Clean," Emily said, spinning her chair around. "We finished the patch. The Ouroboros algorithm has been dismantled. We repurposed the core logic to detect human trafficking patterns in supply chains. We're giving the software away for free to the UN." Liam would have loved that. James smiled. "He would have," Emily agreed. She paused. "Have you visited him?" "Not yet," James admitted. "I was waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For you," James said. "I didn't want to go alone, and I think I think he'd want us to go together. They drove out to the cemetery in James's personal car, no driver. The cemetery was a quiet green space on the outskirts of the city. They walked up the hill to the Hartford family plot. There was a fresh headstone next to James's parents. Liam Hartford, 1992, 2023. He listened to the future. James stood there, looking at the stone. For 3 years he had come here with anger in his heart. He had come here demanding answers. Today, he brought only peace. "I'm sorry it took so long," James spoke to the stone. "I was blind, but Emily opened my eyes." Emily stepped forward and placed a small object on the grave. It was the tracking chip that had been cut out of her arm. "We broke the loop, Liam," she whispered. "No more snakes eating their tails. Just a straight line forward." They stood in silence for a long time. The wind rustled through the trees. "You know," James said, breaking the silence, "I'm stepping down as CEO." Emily looked at him, shocked. "What? Why? You just fixed the company." "I fixed the culture," James corrected. "But I realized something during my week as a janitor. I'm a builder, Emily, not a manager. I want to go back to engineering. I want to work here, at the Institute. With you." "You want to write code?" Emily raised an eyebrow. "I want to build things that help people," James said. "Not just things that make money. Besides, I have a pretty good recommendation for the new CEO." "Oh, who?" "You," James said. Emily laughed, a bright, genuine sound. "Me? I'm a researcher, James. I'm not a suit." "You're not a suit," James agreed. "That's exactly why you're perfect. You know what it feels like to be powerless. You know the cost of corruption. You're the conscience this company needs. Marcus can handle the finances. You handle the vision." Emily looked at the grave, then back at James. She saw the trust in his eyes. "I'll do it," she said, "on one condition." "Name it." "Every new executive we hire," Emily said, "has to spend their first week working as a janitor. No exceptions." James grinned. "Deal." James and Emily walked back down the hill toward the car. As they reached the gate, an old man was sweeping the path. He was wearing a gray uniform, moving with a slow, rhythmic cadence. James stopped. In the past, he would have walked right by. He wouldn't have even registered the man's presence. He would have been on his phone, checking stocks, planning the next acquisition. But today, James stopped. "Good afternoon," James said. The old man looked up, surprised that a man in a tailored suit was addressing him. "Afternoon, sir." "You're doing a great job," James said. "The path looks perfect." The old man smiled, his wrinkled face lighting up. "Thank you, sir. Takes pride, you know." "I know," James said. He extended his hand. "I'm James." The old man wiped his hand on his trousers and shook James's hand. "Arthur." "Nice to meet you, Arthur." James and Emily walked to the car. As James opened the door, he looked back. Arthur was whistling as he swept. James realized that his brother Liam had left him a fortune, yes, but the real inheritance wasn't the money. It was the truth that Emily had carried in her broken arm and the lesson he had learned on his knees, scrubbing marble floors. Visibility is a choice, and once you choose to see people, really see them, you can never look away again. James started the engine. The dashboard hummed. It wasn't the haunting tritone of the Ouroboros code. It was just the sound of a machine working perfectly, guided by human hands. "Ready to go to work?" James asked. Emily smiled, looking at the city skyline in the distance. "Let's go build something good." They drove off, leaving the ghosts of the past behind, heading toward a future where no one had to be invisible.